My parents cut my hair while I slept, the night before my sister's wedding. I woke up to a strange cold feeling on my neck, and at first, I didn't understand what was wrong. The sun's rays were barely breaking through the gaps in the blinds, and the room was submerged in a gray morning twilight. Before the video starts, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like. Enjoy the video. I, Chloe, a 21-year-old girl who had been known as the beautiful one in our family my whole life, reached up to habitually push the thick mass of my honey golden hair from my face, and my fingers met emptiness. Instead of silky locks that fell below my shoulder blades, I felt short, prickly, unevenly chopped strands. My heart skipped a beat, and then began to pound with furious speed. I sat up in bed, and my gaze fell upon the pillow. Lying on the white pillowcase like dead snakes were long, severed locks of hair. My hair. My pride. The thing I cherished so much and which, as it turned out, my own parents hated so deeply. Panic gave way to an icy horror. I leaped out of bed and rushed to the mirror. A monster stared back at me from the reflection. My face, which had always been called perfect, was now framed by a jagged, hideous haircut, evidently done with dull kitchen scissors. Strands stuck out in all directions. Some were cut almost to the root, others were absurdly chopped at ear level. Hot tears of humiliation and rage streamed down my cheeks. I screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, but a scream of betrayal. My parents, Mark and Carol, ran into my room. There was no surprise on their faces. Only guilty resolve and a sad anxiety. "Honey, my mother began, but I cut her off, my voice trembling with anger. "What have you done? What have you done?" I shouted, pointing at my reflection. My father looked down. "Chloe, we just wanted today to be Jessica's day. Only her day." Jessica's day. My older sister. The one who was always the smart one, while I was the beautiful one. From childhood we were divided into these two categories, as if we weren't sisters but two different products on a store shelf. Jessica received praise for her grades and science projects. I received compliments for my long eyelashes, my slender figure, and of course my hair. My parents were proud of me, showing me off like a prize horse at a fair. "This is our Chloe," they would say. "Isn't she a beauty?" But behind this pride, there was always a shadow of concern. They were afraid my beauty would distract from Jessica's merits. And now Jessica's wedding day had arrived. The day she had been planning for years. She was marrying Ryan, a wonderful guy who adored her. I was genuinely happy for her. I helped her choose the dress, taste the cake, and compile the guest list. I was supposed to be her maid of honor. Last night, at the rehearsal dinner, I noticed how tensely my parents exchanged glances every time one of Ryan's relatives complimented me. "Chloe, you look like a movie star. You'll outshine everyone at the wedding," his aunt had said. I smiled politely and changed the subject to what a beautiful bride Jessica would be. But I saw my parents' faces darken. They weren't happy for me. They saw me as a threat to their other daughter's happiness. "Did you think this would help?" I hissed, looking at them through my tears. "Did you think that by disfiguring me, you would make her happier?" "We didn't want to disfigure you," my mother stammered. "We just wanted to take you down a notch, so you wouldn't stand out so much. It's just hair, Chloe, it will grow back." Just hair. For them it was that simple. They didn't understand that they hadn't just cut off hair. They had cut off a part of me, my dignity, my trust in them. They had committed an act of unbelievable cruelty, sneaking up on me in the night like thieves and desecrating me while I slept. In that moment I understood. To them I wasn't a daughter. I was a problem that needed to be solved. I pushed them out of my room and slammed the door, locking it. I slid down the door to the floor and sobbed, my hands clutching what was left of my hair. For about 10 minutes, I allowed myself to drown in despair. My world had collapsed. My family, the closest people to me, had betrayed me in the most despicable way. They wanted me to feel ugly and humiliated. They wanted me to hide in my room and not show up at the wedding. They wanted me to yield the stage to Jessica, remaining behind the scenes with my sorrow. But then the tears dried. Despair was replaced by a cold, ringing fury. I looked at my tear-stained, miserable face in the mirror, at those awful tufts of hair. Well, I would not give them that satisfaction. They wanted to break me, but they had only ignited a fire within me. They wanted to make me invisible, but I would become the center of attention. They wanted this to be Jessica's day. Oh, it would be a day they'd remember. But not at all in the way they had planned. Picked up my phone. With trembling fingers, I found the number in my contacts. Newton, the most expensive and fashionable stylist in the city, who you had to book months in advance. I knew it was his day off. But this was an emergency. Hello. A sleepy male voice answered. Antoine, it's Chloe. I need your help. Urgently. It's a matter of life and death for my reputation. Quickly, falteringly, I explained the situation. He was silent, and I could hear him breathing. Thought he would refuse. But after a pause, he said only one thing. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Don't touch anything. And make the strongest coffee you possibly can. Hanging up, I felt the first glimmer of hope. I gathered all my severed locks from the pillow and the floor. One, the longest and silkiest, I carefully placed in a small box. I would need it later. The rest I threw mercilessly into the trash can. That was the past. Today my new life would begin. I washed my face with cold water, washing away the tears and despair. I looked at my reflection again. Yes, they tried to break me. But they miscalculated. They didn't know that beneath the angelic appearance and silky hair, there was steel. Today they would see that steel firsthand. Antoine arrived as promised. He entered my room, glanced at me, then at the floor, and let out a low whistle. Mon Dieu. Your parents are barbarians. He didn't pity me. He looked at me like a work of art that had been vandalized, and a professional fire burned in his eyes. What can we do with this? Asked, my voice now firm. He walked around me, touching the strands, frowning thoughtfully. We can't get the long hair back. It's impossible to hide this. So we must make it the main feature. Turn a disaster into a triumph. He looked me straight in the eye. We'll give you a daring, ultra-fashionable pixie cut. Short, textured. It will open up your face, accentuate your cheekbones, your eyes. You were a sweet princess. Now you will become a queen who fears nothing. Queen. I like that word. He nodded. Do it. The next 2 hours turned into a magical ritual. Antoine worked his magic on me with scissors, razors, clippers. The sound of the buzzing clippers at my temples was the music of liberation. With every uneven tuft that was cut away, I felt like I was shedding my old skin, the old role of the beautiful daughter. When he finished, I was afraid to open my eyes. Voila, he whispered. Look. I slowly lifted my eyelids. A stranger was looking back at me from the mirror. And she was magnificent. The ultra-short pixie cut with an asymmetrical fringe framed my face perfectly. It was bold, elegant, and incredibly stylish. My large eyes seemed even bigger, my cheekbones even higher. This haircut didn't hide my beauty. It amplified it, adding strength and character. I was no longer just beautiful. I was striking. Antoine did my makeup. Smoky eyes that made my gaze deep and mysterious, and a neutral lipstick on my lips. He helped me into my bridesmaid dress, an elegant silk champagne-colored gown. In contrast with the daring haircut, it looked even more refined. When I was ready, I looked at my full-length reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the crying, humiliated girl I had been just a few hours ago. Before me stood a confident woman, ready for battle. I walked out of my room. My parents were waiting for me in the hallway. They saw me and froze. My mother's face showed shock mixed with admiration. My father just opened his mouth and couldn't say a word. Well, I asked in an icy tone. Am I inconspicuous enough for you? My mother swallowed. Chloe. You look. I know how I look, I cut her off. It's time to go to the church. We can't be late for the most important day of Jessica's life. I walked past them without giving them another glance and descended the stairs with my head held high. The war had begun. The entire drive to the church, my parents were silent. They sat in the front, I in the back, and the tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. They surreptitiously glanced at me in the rearview mirror, trying to read something on my face, but it was an impenetrable mask of calm. They had expected hysterics, tears, a refusal to go to the wedding. They were not prepared for this cold, detached transformation. Their plan had failed, and they knew it. Their attempt to extinguish my light had only made it burn with a new, dazzling force. When we arrived at the church, the guests had already gathered. I got out of the car and took a deep breath. The show was starting. The first person to see me was Ryan's aunt, the same one who had complimented me the night before. She gasped so loudly that everyone standing nearby turned around. "Chloe! My God, what happened to your hair? But it suits you so well. You look absolutely stunning." A crowd immediately formed around me. Whispers, surprised looks, enthusiastic exclamations. "What a bold haircut! Like a model from a magazine cover. Incredibly stylish." No one suspected the truth. Everyone assumed it was my conscious, fashionable choice. I just smiled mysteriously and accepted the compliments. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my parents standing aside, their faces pale. They wanted to humiliate me, and instead, I had become the main topic of conversation before the ceremony even began. Finally, Jessica appeared. She stepped out of the limousine in her grand white dress, excited and happy. When she saw me, she froze. Her smile slid off her face, replaced by complete bewilderment. "Chloe, what have you done to yourself?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on my head. "Like my transformation?" I asked with a slight smile. "Decided to change my image a bit for your big day." She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw not only surprise but also the familiar shadow of jealousy that had haunted us our whole lives. Even now, on her wedding day, in a luxurious dress, she couldn't shake the feeling that I was outshining her again. And it wasn't because of my appearance. It was because of the confidence I radiated. A confidence she had always lacked. Our parents hurried to her, pulling her aside, explaining something to her quickly and quietly. I saw Jessica's face change, going through stages of shock, disbelief, and finally horror. She looked at me, then at our parents, and disgust appeared in her eyes. But the ceremony was about to begin. She was the bride, she couldn't make a scene. She was a hostage of the situation our parents had created. I took my place at the altar. As Jessica walked towards her future husband, Ryan, I could see her smile was forced. She tried to focus on the groom, but her gaze kept returning to me. She knew. She knew what our parents had done. And that knowledge poisoned the happiest moment of her life. During the ceremony, I felt eyes on me. Not just the guests but Ryan's too. He looked at Jessica, but then his gaze would shift to me with an expression of confusion. He also saw that something was wrong with his bride, and he probably guessed that I was the reason. The first part of my plan was complete. I hadn't just survived. I had turned their weapon against them. But this was only the beginning. I had saved the main course of my revenge for the reception. The reception was held at a luxurious country club. Everything was decorated with white flowers, candles flickered, and a live band was playing. Jessica and Ryan sat at the head table, with their parents beside them. I sat at the same table as the maid of honor. The atmosphere at our table was glacial. Mom and Dad didn't dare to look at me. Jessica mechanically smiled at the guests, but her eyes were empty. Only Ryan tried to maintain the semblance of a celebration, but he too felt that something was terribly wrong. It was time for the toasts. Ryan's father spoke first, then his best man. And then the MC announced. "And now, a word from the maid of honor, the beautiful sister of our bride, Chloe." I stood up. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. I picked up my champagne flute and the microphone. I saw the panic in my parents' eyes. My mother was almost imperceptibly shaking her head, begging me to be silent. Jessica was staring at her plate. "Dear Jessica and Ryan," I began in a soft, calm voice. "I look at you today and my heart is filled with joy. Jessica, my dear sister, you have always been an example to me. Smart, determined, kind. You deserve the greatest happiness in the world. And I know that Ryan will give it to you." My parents relaxed a little. The guests smiled. It seemed like it was going to be a normal, sentimental toast. "Many of you have complimented me on my new hairstyle today," I continued, my tone becoming slightly harder. "Many have asked what prompted me to take such a bold step right before my sister's wedding. Usually, such stories are left for the hairdresser's chair, but my story is so closely tied to today that I feel it is my duty to share it." Pause. A tense silence hung in the room. I took the small box out of my purse, opened it, and pulled out the long golden lock. "Look. Do you see this?" I held it up for everyone to see. Just last night I had a whole head of hair like this. I went to sleep in anticipation of my sister's happy day. And I woke up like this. I ran a hand through my short hair. You probably think it was some bad joke by my friends. Or that I, in a fit of madness, decided to decorate myself this way. Well, the truth is known by only a few people in this room. And they are sitting at this table. I turned my head and looked directly at my parents. They were petrified. My mother covered her face with her hands. My father looked at me with hatred and fear. "My own parents, Mark and Carol," I said clearly and loudly so that everyone could hear, "decided that my appearance might outshine their other daughter, the bride. And last night while I was sleeping in my bed, they entered my room with scissors and sheared me like a sheep. They did it out of fear. Out of envy. They wanted to humiliate me to make me hide, so that their smart daughter could finally be the center of attention without competition from the beautiful one." A collective gasp of horror went through the room. The guests looked from me to my parents, to the shocked Jessica. Ryan's family looked as if a bucket of filth had been dumped on their heads. "But they miscalculated," I finished, my voice ringing with triumph. "They thought they would break me. But they made me stronger. They wanted to take away my beauty, but they gave me character. So this toast," I raised my glass higher, "I want to raise not only for the newlyweds. I want to drink to the truth. To the fact that no amount of malice can break a person who does not want to be broken. And so that on this Jessica's day, everyone finally sees the true face of our family." I drained my glass in one gulp and set it down on the table with a thud that echoed through the dead silence of the hall. And then chaos erupted. Someone gasped. Ryan's father stood up, his face purple with rage. He said something sharp to my father, after which his family rose from the table and headed for the exit. Other guests followed them, casting contemptuous glances at my parents. The wedding had turned into a farce. Jessica burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. Ryan, pale and bewildered, tried to comfort her, but he looked at my parents as if seeing them for the first time. And me. I just stood there and watched the results of my work. I didn't feel any gloating. Felt liberation. As if a heavy burden I had carried my whole life had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer the beautiful daughter. I was just Chloe. Person who stood up for herself. I walked over to my crying sister. "I'm sorry, Jess," I said quietly. "I didn't want to ruin your day. But I couldn't let them get away with it." She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, in which pain, anger, and understanding were mixed. She didn't answer. I turned and walked towards the exit, past the empty tables and the shocked faces of the remaining guests. My parents sat at their table like two statues, buried under an avalanche of public disgrace. They had lost everything: respect, reputation, and the trust of both their daughters. Stepping out into the fresh evening air, I took a deep breath. I was alone. I had burned all my bridges. But for the first time in my life I felt truly free. My revenge was complete. But it wasn't just revenge. It was the birth of a new me. And this new me was ready for anything.